the system doesn't want to give us our kids back. If the system wanted to give us our kids back, we would have had them 100 years ago, but we don't. And so it's up to us in this era to be good to our great-grandparents and demand the dignity that our great-grandparents' friends, classmates, relatives, brothers, sisters, cousins, little aunties, little uncles who got left behind over there. We know who didn't come home. We know. And we need to make sure that we bring honor to those students, to the children who had died there, and to give the existential crisis that comes with talking about the boarding school experience. Because one of the biggest issues about the boarding school experience is making people believe that the boarding school experience even happened. You would be so surprised how many average everyday Americans have no clue this even happened. And here's one of the things that, I keep bringing up in my own messaging, in my own, projections out into the ether. This genocide has no name. What do you call what happened to us? We know there is a word for what happened in Armenia. There is a word, a phrase for what happened in Germany in the 1940s. There is a word. What's the word for this? There is no word for this. There is no phrase for this. And yet it is the largest genocide on the face of the planet in all of human history. And it does not have a name. One of the things about mainstream society and the gaslighting that comes with mainstream society is that they try to convince us that all of these things are isolated incidences. Like, oh, well, that only happened a few times. Like not all the schools. Yes, all the schools. Or not every hospital sterilized Indigenous women. Yes, practically every hospital did. All of these things, the facets of our existence, that they're all part of the larger genocide story. And that's what needs to be said. That the boarding school issue isn't an isolated incident. Not at all. It's just another front in the cultural war that never was given a name. It was just another front of the genocide that was never given a name. It was just another mechanism to divide us in an attempt to conquer us. And it needs to be said, it didn't work.
You aren't ready to talk about the shit that you've done to mestizos.
I will start by saying it's hard to talk about people who are mixed in this country and on this continent because the borders are very much a product of colonization and they do affect how experiences are different on one side of the border versus another, but they also don't completely encompass the nuance of that. Second, I'll say, do you know that migrant workers were given kerosene baths and forced to inhale DDT well into the 1960s? From the 19-teens to the 1960s. Do you know that that was a thing? Do you know about the Bracero program? Look that up. Third, forced sterilization in Manitoba of Indigenous women. Yeah, it was happening on the border to mestizos as well. That's genocide. And we can be upset about multiple issues at once. We can fight against anti-racism on multiple fronts at once. We're gonna have a part 2. I'm talking about this more.
It's Women's History Month. Let's do some Argentinian history. Las Madres de la Plaza de Mayo would meet every Thursday in front of La Casa Rosada to petition the government for the live reappearance of their disappeared children. They would wear white headscarves to symbolize the diapers of the stolen children. On the headscarves, they embroidered their names and birth dates. Anybody who spoke up against the Argentinian government in the 70s was subject to being disappeared. And if you were a mother, this also included having your children stolen and given to families that the government approved of. At first, the mothers marched in twos so that it looked like they were taking a stroll, and the government called them las locas, or the crazy ones, and continued to gaslight them, erasing the children's names from all public record, basically having like the children never existed. And still, the numbers grew. During the 1978 World Cup held in Argentina, they also protested. Some of the leaders of this movement were also disappeared, and it was later revealed that many of the disappeared were drugged and thrown out of airplanes into the Atlantic Ocean.
White liberals that Malcolm was talking about are now rebranded as the white leftist.
I've been thinking about this phrasing for a while now, and I want to kind of expand on it. I feel like white leftists, specifically white male leftists, are just one bad interaction or experience from turning their back on this whole thing. And I see this when they talk about Latin American issues. They don't specifically understand the intersectionality of everything. They'll talk about Venezuela or Cuba, or they'll read a whole bunch of books, but they really don't understand how complex Latin American society is. There's so many different layers you need to consider: colorism, decolonization, indigeneity, Latinidad. And the hardest one to understand is machismo, because it's so ingrained in our society. It's what held back the young lords and the brown berets. And that's why conversations with people that don't look like you are important. And putting yourself in uncomfortable situations is also important, because we all want liberation.
Undertold Asian American history. Japanese American draft resistors. In 1944, in the midst of Japanese American internment, the U.S. government announced that the draft would be applied to intern Nisei. A group of young Nisei men at the Heart Mountain Relocation Center recognized the hypocrisy of the draft, which would force them into a segregated regiment to fight in World War II, all for the country that had just stripped them of their rights. They organized the Heart Mountain Fair Play Committee, which resisted physical examinations and criticized internment and encouraged other Nisei to follow suit. For this, they were shipped off to an even more brutal internment camp and later sentenced to prison. These activists are often overlooked in favor of the stereotype of the quiet, obedient, and loyal Japanese American, whose willingness to abide by the rules of assimilation and civic obligation was the prerequisite for white acceptance and social equality. This reinforces the model minority myth, which says that Asian Americans will never challenge white supremacy, a notion the draft resistors directly defied.
Yes, let's talk about this. As I mentioned in my previous video, calling somebody a no sabo kid is made to diminish somebody's Latinidad. So when someone's calling you a no sabo kid, they're calling you whitewashed, and they're saying that your opinion does not matter because you're whitewashed. So now whenever any Latinx person tries to talk about anything progressive, conservative and ignorant Latinos will try to shut them down and silence them by calling them a no sabo kid. And a perfect example of this is them calling literally anybody who uses the terms Latinx and Latine a no sabo kid. I've received hundreds of comments of them calling me a no sabo kid too. Me, a person who spent their entire childhood in Mexico, is now being called a no sabo kid because I use gender inclusive language. So yeah, this whole trend of calling people no sabo kids is problematic for many reasons. And this whole idea that ignorant Latinos have that whiteness equals progressive is really messed up, because you don't have to be white to be progressive. And historically, white people are the last people to get on board for any progressive movement. And the very important fact that they love to forget, Spanish is a white language too. Oh yeah, let's talk about this. This tweet is hilarious because it is 100% true. The casta system that was created by the Spanish ranked people by their skin color and determined who was superior and could build wealth and who was inferior and were meant to be slaves. This is why anti-blackness and racism is so normalized in Latin America. And people still rank each other based on their skin tone to this day. That's why people still worry about the skin tone of their unborn babies. And I know Mexicans know the phrase para mejorar la raza all too well. It literally translates to for the improvement of our race. The phrase was created to encourage people to solely want to marry white people so that eventually we could breed out the black and indigenous genes out of Latin America. And the idea of la raza cósmica was created by a Nazi Mexican philosopher who completely wanted to erase black and indigenous people and culture. So this system ranked people based on skin color, and it demonized darker skin colors and made white skin colors the ultimate goal, with the objective that eventually white would be the only skin color in Latin America. And that system was so effective that we still think this way to this day.
Something that really bothers me is when white British people complain that their grandfathers fought in the war and helped build this country, and so it's unfair that they're poor because the immigrants are coming and stealing their jobs. Like, first of all, Dave, you do realise that poverty within the working class in Britain existed way before we came through. And secondly, they were called world wars. Over 600,000 Africans fought for Britain, and they were paid 3 times less than their white counterparts. India contributed 1.5 million soldiers, and that's more than Australia, Canada, New Zealand and South African troops combined. So if you have a problem with immigrants in the UK, you're not only racist, but you need to utilise a library. I am not the reason that you were poor. Capitalism is.
Yes! I should make an entire series about what you just said. That phrase liability means so much. Like Shonda Rhimes put it perfectly. For a lot of women, it's not kids that hold them back in their career. It's a partner that doesn't help them out. If you don't have a partner who makes your life better, then make your life better by being alone. I am an advocate for the fact that marriage is one, not an accomplishment and not for everybody. And I'm happily married. And I think we need to normalize the idea that marriage can improve your life, but it does not have to be your life. So many men feel that they are entitled to a wife, like it's just something you get after a certain point of being old enough, whereas they think that women have to work and look for a husband, when in actuality, honestly, we don't. No one does. You can be completely fulfilled and happy without a partner. And you won't have those responsibilities and have to check in on another grown person. Like, a lot of these men want a mama, not a wife. And they think they're old ones.
Put your finger down, we need to talk about climate change and girls' education edition. Put your finger down if you learnt about climate change in school. Put your finger down if you knew that girls are more vulnerable to climate change than boys. Put your finger down if you knew that countries with the lowest carbon footprint are the ones hurt the most by climate change. Put your finger down if you can name a female climate activist who isn't from a Western country. Put your finger down if you knew that 12.5 million girls will not complete their education in 5 years' time due to climate-related incidents. Put your finger down if you believe that schools need to teach more about fighting climate change. Put your finger down if you knew that girls' education is a more effective climate solution than electric cars. Put your finger down if you knew that climate justice is linked to racial, economic, and gender justice. If you put more than 5 fingers down, I'm proud of you. If you didn't, but you believe that girls' voices need to be at the forefront of the climate movement, share this audio and help spread awareness.
Okay, I think it needs to be made clear that no one is ever too young to be held accountable for being racist. You're not born being racist. Racism is learned, and if you're old enough to experience the trauma of racism, then you're old enough to know not to be racist. Being a Trump supporter while you were growing up, saying racial slurs, fetishizing a certain group of people, whatever it may be, these are not acceptable coming-of-age trends. Like, I don't know who decided to normalize that being racist is part of a white person's coming-of-age story, but it's not normal, it's not funny, it's not a quirky, shareable backstory. If you interacted with anyone who wasn't white while you were going through your racist phase, there's a good chance that you gave them trauma that they'll have to think about and unlearn for the rest of their lives. And if you did go through that phase at any point, I'm begging you to keep that shit to yourself. If you really have changed and learned from your mistakes and educated yourself, the last thing that you should be doing is bringing your weird racist backstory to the internet, expecting applause from people, especially people of color, for becoming a decent person.
You're saying that these conversations are challenging you. But are you rising to the challenge? Are you rising to the occasion? Or are you just another white person who wants me to pat you on the back because you're having the conversations despite doing nothing to change your behavior?
I really hate this excuse for past evils that goes, well, that's what everybody thought, or that's what everybody did. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't think everybody, or the majority of the world, was in on. Like, for example, I don't think East Asian people saw Dr. Seuss's comics and went, yeah, I'm cool with that. That looks right. Or Yellowface in Hollywood. There's no way that Japanese people watched Breakfast at Tiffany's and were like, oh yeah, this is what we look like. This is what everybody thinks. When people make the excuse, that's what everybody thought, that's what everybody did, they're erasing the personhood of the people who were oppressed. And it allows them to excuse themselves from all the horrendous shit they're taking part in today if it's normalized. Just you watch. 20 years from now, we'll be having conversations about anti-Chinese sentiment during COVID, and people are gonna say, you can't blame those people for making racist jokes, that was normal then. I'm gonna blame them.
I wish we had male birth control.
Oh my god, I actually know the answer to this one. Hold on. In America, we're having the big birth control conversation in the early 1900s, like 1920s, I can't really remember. And male birth control was a conversation, more than a conversation. They did research. They created products. They tested for side effects. It was almost here. But before they could release it on the market, they surveyed a bunch of men to see if they would actually take it. Most working class men, meaning most men, agreed and said that they would take it because working class men actually have to worry about the kid afterwards. Working class men were like, oh my god, I could have sex and not worry about paying for a kid afterwards. That'd be lit. Please, it would also help my wife. But when they surveyed upper class men who don't have to care about any kids that they possibly father, upper class men were only worried about side effects. They didn't give a shit. And they said no. And because the upper class men said no, we don't have male birth control.
I know this is supposed to be fun, but I really don't think people understand autosomal DNA testing on a commercial level. Autosomal DNA can really only go back 500 years without getting additional samples that are not on 23andMe. You're not 100% Irish or 100% Ashkenazi or 100% Ethiopian. To prove that, you can actually take your raw data from 23andMe and upload it to GEDmatch. I dare you. A lot of issues with most DNA testing because they don't articulate to people what it can and cannot do. And rather than be honest about it, they're letting a lot of people take these tests, and that only reinforces ethno-nationalism, ethnocentrism, and really fucked up racial science beliefs that have like spread throughout TikTok. It's actually very scary. Upload your results to GEDmatch. Get your raw data, upload it to GEDmatch. You will see what I'm talking about.
As a Haitian Creole speaker, one thing I hate is when people say that Haitian Creole is just watered down French, and it's really not. And I find it extremely offensive, racist, and harmful when people say that. So I want to share some words with you that are directly from an African root or the Taino language. We have the first word, which is yo, and it comes from the Fangbe language, which is also ye, and it means they, them. It's a pronoun. We have kalalu, which comes from the Taino language, and it's okra. We have mahasa, which comes from the Kigongo language, and it means twins. We have canari, which comes from the Taino language, and it's basically something you put water to sit in, and my grandmother really does that in the water. It's really good. We have the word Haiti itself, which comes from the Taino language, and it means the land of high mountains or the land of flower and highland. And the last word we have is zombie, which comes from the Kikongo language, and it means...
Every single time I start talking about propaganda, people start asking me, oh my god, like, does that mean I can't watch this anymore? Should I stop? I'm not here to tell you what to do, and I absolutely won't. But I am here to give you information. These shows are repetitive in a way that makes them kind of cathartic because the good guys win in the end. They're structured in a way where you attach your empathy on somebody very quickly, so then their pain becomes your pain. You look for the crime to be solved to repitiate your pain. They're set up in a way where problems are disappeared, but remember that jails don't disappear problems, they disappear people. And, you know, part of how I know so much about these shows is because I used to watch a lot of them. I mean, they're taking up still about 20% of all cable TV. But here's the thing. Now you have information. Whether it's from my videos or other things you've seen, you know that these shows are propaganda that support a violent system of policing. You have the information, and now you're accountable to make a decision based on that.
So every time I hear people talking about anti-intellectualism, they seem to be talking about like working class people not trusting science, which is a phenomenon. There are a lot of people who think that academia is a conspiracy to turn us all gay and make us buy solar panels. I would argue that that's very often suburbanites, but that's another TikTok. I never see people talking about the anti-intellectualism that flows from the affluent to the poor. If you grow up a poor kid exposed to rich kids, there's a good chance that a lot of what you got bullied for was being resourceful. Why is your lunch in a plastic bag? Oh, because it's free. And we have 2,000 of them. Are there blankets on your windows? They insulate better than curtains? Why is one of your headlights a motorcycle headlight that's duct taped on? Bold of you to assume I can afford name brand duct tape. How come you keep using things for like not what they were marketed for? I'm capable of conceptual transfer, are you not? Self-learning and lateral problem solving have never been optional things for people in poverty. Becoming middle class often means abandoning ingenuity because it makes middle class people uncomfortable. You do something yourself, it's not smart, it's sketchy.
Monoculture. One race, one language, one way of life. Monoculture requires violent methods of removal, which include environmental destruction, genocide, incarceration, and involuntary sterilization of disabled peoples. We will go into detail how Black and Indigenous and people of color are the main targets of removal. Monoculture requires the establishment of a status quo, a supremacy ending ever despite diversity in human population. The status quo is maintained via the ideology of the isms, which are arbitrary in nature, but we've come to accept them and weaponize them as part of functioning society. This infighting in bios is backed by the medical industrial complex, the military and prison industrial complex, school to prison pipeline, and scientific fields whose interests crisscross with capitalism or maintaining the status quo. Hence why all of these institutions are inherently biased and problematic, and why terms like abolition and defense exist. Capitalism is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, turnover and maximum profit. The establishment of the status quo or an elite ensures profit and privilege to those who belong to the majority at the expense of minorities.
Hello, white woman. What you did was racist. Hello, black woman. I don't understand what you mean. Your actions just now were racist and hurt me. Why are you talking to me like that? You're being mean. I'm not being mean. I'm just stating my feelings. What you did was racist and it hurt me. Stop with the negativity. You're going to make me cry. This is textbook white fragility. You're victimizing yourself to put me in the position to apologize to you. I won't do it. I was hurt by you. Someone help. This mean black bitch is bullying me. I noticed noticed something from my last TikTok. A lot of white people were commenting, yeah, white people who do this are annoying. I can't believe white people don't know how racist this is when they themselves are white. And it's a level of performative wokeness, but it's also deeper than that. These white people are separating themselves from the bad white people who need to be taught a lesson about racism. They believe that being anti-racist is a destination, and then once you get enough woke points, you no longer have to do anything. When you do that, you believe that I'm one of the good ones and I don't need to do any introspection to unlearn harmful behavior. I'm gonna hurt some feelings. It's a hard pill to swallow, but we need to say it. Generation politics is a scam. You're not more woke for being young, and being old does not necessarily make you a fascist or a reactionary. Generation politics, pitting boomers against millennials, against zoomers, is just a way to ignore the real problems that are going on. Old people aren't your enemy. Young people aren't automatically your allies. We have a bunch of white 17-year-olds believing that they are the forefront for liberation when this fight has been passed on painstakingly from marginalized people for generations. I'm going to put a link to this in the comments, but the reason why old people seem more conservative, because the radical old people died young. This should make you angry. Stop blaming baby boomers for everything, because Gen Z is still out here calling me the N-word.
I'm just gonna say this because it's been on my mind for a long time. I don't really understand when white people are upset that people of color are making jokes about how they are treating us. I'm like, we are not, why would we make that shit up? Where did we get it from?
A common response to learning about anti-blackness is to want to get rid of racialized categories altogether. We're all human, right? Race should just be taken out of the equation. For day 4, I want to talk about one of my biggest takeaways from Black studies and theorists of anti-Blackness, and that is the rejection of liberal humanism. So bear with me because today's going to be a little dense, but I want to talk about 3 things: ontology, humanism, and the rejection of the category of man. So ontology is one of those words that I hate because it seems so complicated, but it's actually pretty easy to understand and very helpful, especially if you want to read more in depth on anti-Blackness. Ontology is a philosophical concept that deals with the nature of being. It's literally the study of being, how things become, what things are, like what makes a bird and separates it from other animals. That's ontology. Ontology is super important when it comes to anti-Blackness because much of anti-Blackness is happening on a level of ontology. Anti-Blackness requires an answer to the question, how do we distinguish Black people from others?
Did you know that there was this huge volcanic eruption that caused the crater lake? Yes, we do. We have a story about it. Oh, well, did you know that there was a gigantic earthquake that caused the continent to break off into tiny islands? Yes, we do. We have a story about it. Oh, well, did you know that we just found out that there was a bunch of tiny islands off the coast of Australia and now they're all underwater? Yes, we do. We have a story about it.
What's something that people glamorize that's actually just extremely toxic?
I hope I never have a daughter. See, I can't have a girl. Boys are just so much easier to take care of. No, boys aren't easier to take care of. Y'all just stop taking care of them. You see, we can talk all day about how men are trash, but their parents are the ones that did not raise them. If you don't fix their mistakes, that's on you. However, y'all don't instill anything into young men, then expect them to just be world-class citizens. The only thing you told them to do was be emotionless and go make money. They are emotionally stunted at whatever age you gave up on them at. That's why there's a whole bunch of 26-year-old fucking 12-year-olds walking around. Yet y'all will sit here and crucify your daughters for sex they haven't even had yet. It's so weird how hard y'all are on young girls. Y'all know we only have like 8 days out of the month where our hormones aren't jumping off a fucking wall, right? And yet, cause we're the ones that can have babies, we have to be the responsible ones because we have to raise our kids and ourselves and our men. Our world's so fixated on sons, why don't y'all raise them?
I don't know who needs to hear this, but once you add the suffix ism to the end of any form of discrimination, that means that it is systemic. The definition of the suffix ism is a distinctive practice, system, or philosophy, typically a political ideology or an artistic movement. So anti-Semitism, sexism, ableism, colorism, racism, they all operate in a systemic manner, and then there are people who perpetuate and uphold it on an interpersonal level. That's how those things work. So technically speaking, saying systemic racism is redundant because once I say racism, it's already systemic.
What's a piece of information that you learned that feels illegal to know?
Debt invalidation. Collection agencies buy their debts on huge spreadsheets for pennies on a dollar. They don't have the necessary information that they legally have to have in order to collect on that debt, such as date of birth and social security number, etc. There's a huge list. That's why when they call, hello, is this so-and-so? I need you to verify your date of birth and your social so we can confirm we have the right person. It's not to confirm they have the right person. It's so they can get the info that they legally need to collect the debt. Most of us are like, oh, my date of birth is 5/21, blah, blah, blah. So you Google something called the debt verification letter. You send it off. They have 30 days to respond. If they don't respond, it's invalidated. Most of the time they will respond and it'll say, sorry, we don't have the information needed to collect this debt. This debt is now invalid. You send that into the credit bureaus and it's wiped away as if it never existed. It doesn't show up as a paid off debt, an old debt, nothing. It's completely wiped away as if it never existed and your credit score continues to rise.
The way that homophobia runs rampant amongst straight men, as if straight men don't live their life to impress other men. A majority of straight men will do and say just about anything for validation from other men. But yet you have a problem with a man dating another man. Baby, at least that motherfucker got a title. You doing the shit you do for free. And there's never any limitations. You motherfuckers will sit in jail and or in a grave trying to get validation from men. But you have a problem with the gays. I don't understand how the fuck that makes sense to y'all.
They let you pick any name you want when you get down there.
And you landed on McLovin.
Yeah, I was between that and Muhammad.
Why the fuck would it be between that or Muhammad? Why don't you just pick a common name like a normal person?
Muhammad is the most commonly used name on earth. Read a fucking book for one.
That one time 5,000 black kids went to jail in Birmingham.
5,000 black kids? Yeah, you ain't know? Hell no. All those pictures with the hoses? And the dogs? Yeah, those were all kids. I see what had happened was Dr. King had just gotten out after writing a letter from a Birmingham jail and found out that the state was making money off black people by putting them in prison and forced them to pay bail to get out. So he figured black folks could flip the script and pack the prisons without paying bail and then force the state to have to pay money to house and feed them. Yes, but where did the kids come in? When he asked their mamas and daddies, they was on some, I work for a white man, gotta keep putting food on the table, sorry. I feel you, but I can't have the clan on my lawn scaring my babies. Then the children stood up and said, pick me. But because none of the adults were here for it, kids from elementary all the way to high school worked with local radio show hosts and local pastors to pull off this secret operation they called D-Day.
Quick public service announcement. Slavery lasted from 1619 to 1865. That's 246 years. But 1865 to 2021 is only 156 years. That means slavery was most of American history, white people. Yes, it still affects us, white people. Quit acting like that shit old. Okay, thanks. Bye. Enjoy your Black History Month.
Things you thought Martin Luther King Jr. did, but he didn't. Oh, the Montgomery bus boycott? Absolutely not. That was actually this black woman named Joanne Robinson. She was the leader of the Women's Political Council in Montgomery, Alabama. And these ladies a whole year prior to Claudette Colvin getting arrested, Rosa Parks getting arrested, or Martin Luther King even arriving had already written a letter to the mayor saying that they had planned and organized and orchestrated the whole boycott and what it would look like. But when the time came, my girl and her sisters did not get any credit, but that didn't keep them from putting their feet to the gas and keeping it pushing. Oh, you said the March on Washington? Wrong again. That was put together in only 8 weeks by this man, Bayard Rustin, an openly gay black man. But you know, in the 50s and 60s, being openly gay and black was definitely going to get you pushed under the rug. But he's responsible for actually a lot of King's demonstrations and helping him to write even some of his speeches. But no shade, King was made the figurehead of the civil rights movement because he was straight, because he was a man, and because he was a pastor. And that was a perfect picture to put in front of the cameras and nobody could attack his credibility.
Show me something extremely racist from an old Disney movie.
Okay, I never noticed until I was like a full-ass adult, but Snow White. And I know you're confused because I was too at first. I was like, hold on, there's no people of color in Snow White, so what's the thing? You know where you have collectibles of like black people and it was, you know, based in slavery. Well, those used to sell like hotcakes back in the day. And during the Whistle While You Work song, did you see it? I'll give you another chance. It's coming again. Right there. Right fucking there. It's a slave's head.
If you're neurodivergent, what's one life lesson you can offer people?
It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Like, I remember my friend showed me this quote and it was like, it clicked something in my brain because I was like, why do we never interrogate the social causes of mental illness? Why do we always fall back on like biology and psychology and then like go to medication to treat these things rather than like holistically look at the issues at hand and like actually interrogate why the fuck is mental illness a norm in society now? Like the fact that everyone can at least name at least one person in their life that is like mentally ill to some degree, that is a reflection upon society and like how that has literally created the conditions for like people to become mentally ill. Like the way that we pathologize mental illness to be like this like outlier and then we individualize it to be like a reflection of like, oh, there's something fucking wrong in their brain, when like we never interrogate like the social causes of what are creating these problems within people's lives.
Listen, I'm Mexican, right? So I told my mom, I said, damn, Mom, you used to beat the hell out of us when we were little. She said, no es cierto. Yo no les pegaba. No? No? Where did I get that trauma from then? Chuck E. Cheese? I don't think that's a topping on the pizza, Mom.
Let me say one final thing on sex work and the black market. If you think anything I've said in my videos or any comments I've made have been like mean or, you know, rude, wait until you're dealing with the people up top. If you ever meet them. Wait until you're dealing with the police. Wait until you're dealing with the federal government. Then you will find out who is really mean. See, the people up top, the big fish, they love that y'all are making these dumbass mistakes, like asking all these kinds of questions, posting how you're going to commit fraud, posting pictures of your money. They love that because it motherfucking takes away attention from them, from the sharks. Y'all don't even know who the sharks are. You don't even know they're in the water. Wait until you're dealing with the bank's legal team. The fact that you don't know that a bank has a legal team, you don't need to be getting into this life. You don't know nothing about it.
Alexa, play El Chico del Apartamento 512.
Sorry, I can't find the station you requested.
Alexa, play El Chico del Apartamento 512 by Selena.
El Chico del Apartamento 512 by Selena from Spotify.
Fucking done. I'm fucking done.
Foreign words that just make sense.
Kuchisabishi is a Japanese word that roughly translates to when you're not hungry but you eat because your mouth is low.